Hey everyone, Mr. Sujano here, your source for gaming, tech, emulation, and open source news. Let's get started. Alright, we'll kick things off talking about ESDE. ESDE stands for Subscribe to Mr. Sujano, or Emulation Station Desktop Edition, depending on how you want to interpret that. Anyways, ESDE has just launched for Android. And interestingly enough here, it's on the Amazon App Store. While this is pretty exciting, my first question here is why is this not on the Google Play Store? And they provided an answer. That is a question for Google. They have done everything in their power to obstruct the release of ESDE, including constantly rejecting the releases without supplying meaningful explanations why, refusing to respond to tickets and emails, and in general being incredibly difficult to deal with. There's a chance that there will be a Play Store release in the future, but there's also a chance it never happens. On a side note here, ESDE on Android is not 100% free and open source. It's partially closed source and it does cost some money. ESDE is currently listed for $5.39, and for those who may be unaware, ESDE is an emulation front end. It works with your emulators, it's not an emulator in itself. It's similar to something like Launchbox or Daigisho or Reset Collection or others. If you are curious about this one, I'll drop a couple of helpful links in the description below. The Amazon store, the documentation, and the FAQ. Next up, we're quickly talking about VL, and it's been reported that another game has been randomly taken off the website. And this time it's Ratchet & Clank Collection. The individual games are still there, but the collection has been removed. Moving on, and we're talking about the Atari 2600, and it appears there's 3 games that have never been released that have just been released. There are 6 games listed here. 3 of these were previously available, Cat Tracks, Funky Fish, and Pleiades, and 3 of these are previously unreleased. Hobo, R2D Tank, and Spiders. If you wanted to see these games in action, John Hancock has a video and I'll drop a link to it in the description below. Feel free to check it out. Next up, a brand new exploit has just been released for the original Xbox, and they say it's working on stock consoles with just a save. It can be triggered from the dashboard and used as an entry point for unsigned code. No exploit games or swaps needed. Fittingly, this is called Endgame. It's 100% free and open source, and I'll drop a link to the GitHub in the description below. Now, it is worth pointing out they say Endgame is not a soft mod, not by itself. They say it will make soft modding significantly more accessible. And speaking about accessible, next up we're quickly talking about Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree. And the trailer for this is going to be accessible very soon. I'll drop a link to it in the description below. It might already be accessible by the time you're watching this video. Next up, we're quickly talking about Xbox and physical games, and I'll drop a link to this GameFile interview with Phil Spencer in the description below, and I do recommend checking it out. Interestingly, Phil Spencer says they are supportive of physical media. However, a majority of customers are buying games digitally. And it's not like they're going to ship a whole bunch of physical games if nobody is buying them. And Phil Spencer also says gaming consoles themselves have kind of become the last consumer electronic device that has a drive. And it is an issue because the number of manufacturers that are actually able to build these drives are decreasing. Now, although I'd argue the customers are probably not going to see the benefit of a company reducing costs by distributing games digitally only and manufacturing digital-only consoles, I'm assuming that's going to be the way of the future. And speaking about digital, next up we're talking about Nintendo emulation on Apple devices with Delta, and Delta version 1.5 has just dropped. So at the time of filming, version 1.5 is the latest update, and they've added local multiplayer support for up to 4 people with NES, SNES, and N64. On top of that, they've added AirPlay support so you can stream games to TV, and also non-MFI controller support. Delta is a multi-system emulator for the NES, SNES, Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance, DS, 64, and also Sega Genesis. And speaking about multiplayer, next up we're talking about The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess online mod. If you are curious about this one, I'll drop a link to the trailer in the description below and feel free to check it out. It's being released in summer of this year, and the alpha is already available on their Patreon page. There are a couple of notes here. Apparently this thing will support up to 16 players, which would be absolutely wild. and they say it's only available on a GameCube PAL version of the game, and it only works in Dolphin. Let me know your thoughts about this one in the comments below. And speaking about mods, next up we're jumping up a few generations from the GameCube to the Switch, and we're talking about The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, and a brand new 4K texture pack has just dropped on Nexus Mods. If you wanted to see the texture pack in action, I'll drop a link to the YouTube video in the description below and feel free to check it out. In my opinion, everything looks a little bit more vibrant. Next up, we're quickly talking about Twitch, and if you live in certain areas, Twitch subscriptions are about to get a little bit more expensive. For example, here in Australia, Canada, and the UK, Twitch subs are going up by $1. Now, it's worth noting this is only for Tier 1. They say they're not increasing the price of Tier 2 and Tier 3 subs, at least not yet. And if you're in Turkey, there is something to note here. They're increasing the price of Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 subs. And they're increasing it by a considerable margin. I mean, before for Tier 1 was $9.90, and now it's going to be $43.90. And Tier 3 was $49.99, and now it's going to be $215.90. As far as I know here, the new prices are taking effect after March 28th, and they say existing subscriptions will automatically renew at the new price. So if you aren't aware of these price changes, you may be in for a rude awakening. And speaking about heads up, last up here, it's just a heads up about a brand new Pokemon Presents that's happening on February 27th. It's going to be celebrating Pokemon Day. As far as I know, it's going to be airing on their YouTube channel, and they don't have anything to take a look at just yet, but I'll drop a link to their YouTube channel in the description below, and feel free to check it out. But anyways, that is all I've got for you in this one. Straight to the point, all stuff and no fluff. We talked about a bunch today. Let me know your thoughts about absolutely any of it in the comments below. If you liked this video, leave a like. If you didn't like this video, leave a like. Hit that subscribe button, check out my other videos, don't tempt fate, save your state.